Collaborators or victims? In Mosul, WION correspondent Daniele Pagani met a woman whose husband and stepson fought for the Islamic State. She lived better than others and had enough food. But with her husband now in prison, the woman says that she's also a victim of war. This is her story.
Inside the Hammam al-Alil refugee camp, 30 kilometers from Mosul, we meet a woman. She agrees to talk to us on condition of anonymity. Her husband and her stepson were both members of the Islamic State. In a camp where every refugee shows the strain of months of fighting, she is surprisingly in good shape. Her skin is well kept. She's even wearing a little makeup and appears well fed. While other people were starving under the constant rain of bombs, she was among the privileged, enjoying good food and other necessities.
They were paying a salary for your husband and son.
They were paying us salaries. We got $20 a month for every child and $30 a month for every wife a fighter had. My husband's son, who died in battle, was his second wife's son.
Like many others, her husband had served in the Iraqi armed forces before the advent of the Islamic State.
How did it happen?
Before the Islamic State came, my husband was working with the Iraqi Special Forces. He used to go often to Erbil for work. When the Islamic State came, they asked my husband to work with them. At the beginning, they were very good and they told him that if he was willing to join them, they would not harm him. He finally decided to join them.
Her stepson died on the battlefield, but her husband is alive, a prisoner of the Iraqi army. She hopes he will get justice, but Iraqi soldiers, after having lost so many companions, are unlikely to be generous with Islamic State collaborators.
What is she afraid of now?
My husband joined ISIS, but after 8 months he wanted to leave them. We stayed in Mosul together with all the families of the Islamic State fighters. After some time, the Iraqi army came to liberate the neighborhood we were in, and when that happened, my husband surrendered to the Iraqi army. I do not know what is my future. I am afraid of both the Islamic State and the Iraqi army. I only want to live in peace.
She is not originally from Mosul. She comes from Al-Shargat, 100 kilometers south. She and her family fled when they apprehended that the Al-Hashd al-Shabi, known as the Shia Popular Mobilization Units, and the Iraqi army were advancing towards her city.
When the Iraqi forces were advancing towards Tikrit, they told us to flee, and for that reason we decided to go to Mosul.
She's worried about the Al-Hashd al-Shabi.
The Islamic State told us that the popular mobilization units are raping people. That is one of the reasons why they told us to leave our hometown, to take away our sons and daughters.
The Battle of Tikrit happened in March 2015, which means she and her family have been in Mosul ever since. Recalling the moment her husband decided to join the Islamic State, a veil of regret covered her words.
Does she feel responsible? I mean, does she feel guilty because her husband and son decided to go and join the Islamic State? Did she try to stop them or not?
I tried to prevent my husband from joining the Islamic State, but I could not. I told him we have a son and a daughter. I told him he had a good job in Erbil, that we had money. But my husband was too scared and he joined the Islamic State.
Several other families whose members joined the Islamic State are now in a camp closer to Mosul, in Bartella, a place where cameras are completely forbidden and media restricted. The camp hosts only women and children. Wives and mothers cry. They say they tried to prevent their husbands and sons from joining the Islamic State. They ask for mercy and say it is not their fault. Iraq is a country where women have little say in men's choices, and these women's voices leave us with a difficult question. Are they partners in the crimes of the Islamic State, or are they victims like the thousands of others who lost their families to the terror outfit's brutality. Daniele Pagani for WION.
And now the story of another woman, one who lost her husband and is lugging his body around for administrative formalities. Her story is heartbreaking, but it's not unique. The ISIS may be out, but the battle for women like her is not over.
Every day at dawn, the civil defense personnel leave their small base in the city of Mosul. They drive to the old city with a difficult but fundamental task, digging through the rubble to find families, both dead and alive. They come back every day with trucks full of corpses. People come here with pictures of their beloved. They cry, they ask for
We'll try to bring you the story, but we have with us in the studio the man who spoke to these women. And, you know, as you described the story of these women, that this question has been haunting me since our first conversation about this. Are they victims? Are they perpetrators? You saw them up close. You spoke to them. You spoke to others like them. Have you been able to answer that question?
No. No, I haven't. The question is haunting me too. Let's try to open up a little bit now. Talk about what we need to think about in order to find an answer. So on the one hand, we have a woman who has been doing well throughout the war. He's been eating food. She was surprisingly not skinny, and that really astonished me, because inside a refugee camp it is impossible to find people who are not skinny. People were starving. People have been without food for months. She was eating. She was drinking. Her children were the same. Children were good. They were fatty, I would say. One of them was even a little bit too fat. And so I thought about it and I said, you witnessed people starving while you were having food on your table every day. So that, to me, makes you a partner in crime. But then I have to say that she was not fighting. Her husband was. Her stepson was. And I am sure, I know Iraq, I am sure that she had absolutely no say in what they were deciding for themselves. Iraq is not a place where you ask to your wife, can I go and fight? It's not. You go there and you tell them, look, I decided to go and fight. Shut up. That's it. So I started thinking that what happened to her, it's not something that she decided. It was a decision that was just thrown against her, and she had to do it. But yes, she enjoyed some benefits of this decision.
Can you blame, I don't know, can you blame somebody for eating the food in front of them on a table? I mean, why would anyone want to starve? But this is one of the many, many moral dilemmas that a war, I think, presents before you. But these two women you met, and in most wars we know that women and children are the worst sufferers, but they have very little say, if any at all, in the decisions that are taken, in how they arrive in that situation. Would you say that these two stories essentially reflect the microcosm of a macrocosm that Mosul is today? That this is happening everywhere in Mosul?
They do. They very much do. Mosul is a city which is divided in two, in many ways. Geographically, the Tigris River runs in between the cities. The east part is now back on track. The western part is completely destroyed, and when I say completely, I definitely mean it. It's an enormous pile of rubble. Enormous. You can drive 10, 20, 30 minutes in between, and there's only rubble. And it's divided in two because there are civilians who never joined the Islamic State in Mosul and civilians who did. Out of several reasons. Someone did because they wanted to, someone did because they were forced to at a gunpoint, someone did it because that was the only way they had to eat some food at the end of the war. So yes, these two ladies do represent what Mosul is today, a city divided in two in many ways. Putting these two parts together once again is the major challenge, because at a certain point we will have to decide if they are partner in crime or not. We will have to decide. Justice needs to be there. Because if I lost my son to the Islamic State brutality, and perhaps your husband killed my son and you did nothing to prevent your husband to kill my son, how can I live again in the same city with you? That's a problem. That's a major problem. And it will not be easy to understand how to deal with it morally, politically, economically, geographically. There's no aspect.
And women like
in
these will
which
come face to face more and more.
Obviously, many of these people have been living throughout the war in the same neighborhoods. The neighborhood close to the Al-Nuri Mosque, where many Islamic State militants, terrorists, fighters, call them whatever you want, were based, was also the place where the woman, whose story we will perhaps be able to see, lost her husband. There, in those very lanes when, well, other women were having food and enjoying the commodities of being Islamic State fighters, other women were losing their
And
sons.
in a strange way now, these two women and others like them are in a similar situation. They're living alone in a country where women can do very little if they're alone. How do they get by? What kind of support do they have, given the piles of rubble you're talking about? They're rebuilding from scratch.
When it comes to women who lost their beloved to the Islamic State brutality, means that they have either been killed or they died because of the Islamic State, so they were not part of the Islamic State. There is a lot of support by many NGOs. I'm not saying they are living a comfortable life, because they are not. They are living a personal odyssey. They left their houses. They don't know if they will ever return, if their houses are still there. They don't know what to do, but NGOs are there. The United Nations and many local NGOs are there. They will try to provide them with all the support they can in order to help them to go back to Mosul, where they were living. On the other hand, all these so-called ISIS women and ISIS families, which in itself doesn't mean anything because it's just a semantic label which is very dangerous, do not enjoy this much support, because the Iraqi government is putting a sort of a veto. There is another camp in Bartella, close to the camp of Hammam al-Alil, which we just showed. It's full of women whose sons or brothers or husbands were part of the Islamic State. I got into that camp without a camera, and medias are not welcome. It's nearly impossible. Very few NGOs do have access, and only for basic necessities like food. That's it. No one is going to take care of these women, which at the end of the day perhaps are as victims as the others, from another perspective, but they are.
Absolutely. Some food for thought here. Daniele, thanks very much. And for our viewers, you can go to WIONnews.com to see the story of these two women and other stories. Daniele has just returned from Mosul, just days after Iraq's second